Hello and welcome to the preview of this weekend's game between Chelsea and Brentford. Also, we'll take a closer look at some of the games happening in the English Premier League this particular weekend. Chelsea, they travel away to Brentford and they'll be looking for a victory in this particular encounter to solidify their chances and hopes of securing a top 4 finish in this season's English Premier League. However, for Brentford, there's not much to fight for as it stands now, currently 11th with 41 points. And they will look at this game as a game of getting victory, mainly for the competitiveness of it, rather than securing, let's say, an European spot in the league, as it looks more unlikely with the games left to play. Also, when you take a closer look at Chelsea's team, they managed to pick a 1-0 victory in their last game against Tottenham Hotspur at Stamford Bridge. For Brentford, their last game was a 2-1 loss to Newcastle. However, in their last 5 games, that's for Chelsea, they've only lost once, and that game was against Arsenal. For Brentford, they've only won twice in their last 5 games. Those victories coming against Bournemouth and also another against Leicester City. But these victories were away from home, so one would argue that this is a game that Chelsea would have a chance in. Generally, Chelsea's games in the last few 5 games, I should say, has been a very low-scoring game. So we take a look, for instance, the game between Tottenham ending by 1-0 against Arsenal, losing by 1-0, Copenhagen winning by 1-0, Leicester winning by 1-0. So if you look at this trend of results, one would argue that this is a game that is poised for a 1-0 finish or a 1-1 between the two sides. However, I feel that there are 3 goals in this particular game, and I do think that Brentford will get a goal, but Chelsea to get 2 more goals in this particular one to win the game by 2-1. Now, let's take a look at the lineups and how I think Chelsea will be able to win this game by 2-1. I'm going for a back four of Reece James and alongside the likes of Colwill, Trevor Chalobah and Marco Correa with Sanchez in goal. The midfield, I'm going for a pairing of Moise Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez once again, whilst the attacking 3 behind the striker, Cole Palmer to start once again. On the left flank, I'm going in for Christoph Nkunku to start this one. And down the right, I'm going for Noni Madueke to start. Up front, I'm going for Nico Jackson because he's the only striker primarily available for Chelsea to start this one. Pedro Neto is starting from the bench, not for any reason, but I think just for reshuffling reasons, we might see some new faces in there. I won't have any qualms or think there's any problem if the likes of Pedro Neto or Jadon Sancho starts this one, because I think for the winger situation in Chelsea, it's more of a toss of a coin in terms of who starts, because the productivity has not been so good from either of them. But you would argue that Pedro Neto has been the best winger so far in this calendar year. So Chelsea to go in with this particular lineup, and I do think that at the end of the day, they'll manage to pip Brentford by 2-1. Now, let's take a look at some of the other games happening this weekend in the Premier League. Everton play host to Arsenal. I do think Everton would manage a narrow win in this particular game because Arsenal will have one eye on the game with Real Madrid, and with the injuries they incurred in their previous game, they would want to avoid any further injuries. So with that eye on the game for Real Madrid, Everton will take advantage of that to win by a narrow margin. The other game also is between Crystal Palace and Brighton. Crystal Palace and Brighton will be one poised game. It's a game that I do not expect a lot of goals to happen. There might be a maximum of 3 goals in there, and I do think Crystal Palace will have more than enough to go past Brighton. Crystal Palace to beat Brighton by 2-1. And it's Ipswich versus Wolves also on Saturday. With that particular game, Ipswich themselves, they look like they've already been condemned to be relegated this season. Wolves don't have much to fight for, just making sure that the relegation fight does not draw them in with the remaining games left. I do think that will give them a slight upper hand in this one, and I feel that this is going to be a game that would have a minimum of 4 goals, and I tip it to be a 2-2 between the sides. Ipswich 2, Wolves 2. In the game between West Ham and Bournemouth, that is one particular game where you would have a lot of tactical play taking place. Graham Potter still unable to unleash his full potential at West Ham, but when you look at Bournemouth, they have been one of the most exciting sides in the Premier League. this particular season. But I do think that Brentford would have enough in the tank to go past West Ham. It's going to be a very cagey encounter, but Bournemouth to win that game by 2-1. The other game between Aston Villa and also Nottingham Forest, these are two sides that are pushing hard to get Champions League places for the coming season. Aston Villa themselves, they also have to keep an eye on the Champions League games coming up pretty soon. And that's the particular game with Paris Saint-Germain. For Nottingham Forest, it is about securing that third position and ensuring that it is on lockdown. I think that this would be a very interesting game, but I do tip Nottingham Forest to go to Villa and beat them by 1-0. The game between Fulham and Liverpool also on Sunday. Liverpool, they are out of the Champions League. However, the league title also seems all but secured for Liverpool. I do think that it will be a great watch for the neutrals toward this particular one, but Liverpool fans will not enjoy this so much, as I do see Fulham beating Liverpool by 2-1. For the game between Tottenham and Southampton, I do think that Tottenham would get goals here. Southampton will also get a goal or two in this particular encounter. However, at the end of the day, I think that Tottenham would have too much for Southampton, who look bound to be relegated as they've been utterly poor in this season's Premier League. I do go for Tottenham to win the game against Southampton by 3-1 and expect the likes of Dominic Solanke and also their left back Destiny Udogie to be on the score sheet. For the game between Manchester United and Manchester City, I do think that this is going to be interesting, and it's a Manchester derby, of course, and it's one of the games that people would always look out for. This season, however, it is two sides that are not playing to their best. Manchester City could still make the Champions League. Manchester United could also make it, but mainly through the route of winning the Europa League. I do think that Manchester City have way too much for Manchester United when you look at it from a tactical point of view and from a team strength point of view. But we have seen countless times how Manchester United, when it comes to these big games, always put in a good performance. I do think that game will end 1-1 between Manchester United and Manchester City. On Monday night, it's Leicester City coming up against Newcastle. Leicester struggling to score a goal in their last, I think, 5 to 7 matches. And also for Newcastle United, they've been relatively good in recent times, looking at also their victory in the Carabao Cup. So I do look at this game closely, and I think Leicester will manage to get a goal for the first time in a long while, but Newcastle will have too much for them. Newcastle to beat Leicester City by 3-1. So that's it for the preview of the game between Chelsea and Brentford, as well as all the games happening in the Premier League this weekend. Catch you with some review after the games.